think about for a moment what you think these three men share in common between Dr. King, President Obama, and LeBron James. I'll give you a few seconds. All amazing, I heard. I agree. One thing that I think they all share in common, that I know they share in common, is that they're all very famous black men. And so famous that I'm sure as soon as their faces popped up on the screen, you recognize them immediately. And even though I abbreviated the names and used the titles of the first two men, Dr. King, President Obama, I'm sure you could tell me their full names and also talk about their historical impact, their contribution to society, and even share your other opinions about what you think about their lives. Maybe you even know some personal details about the intimate parts of their lives if you followed them well enough. So whether you have attended a luncheon or a breakfast celebration in honor of Dr. King on his birthday or for Black History Month, or you were old enough to campaign for or vote for President Obama, or you're somebody who trolls social media comment threads talking about the legacies of LeBron James compared to Michael Jordan, and who's the GOAT compared to the two of them. So even if you haven't done any of those things, you recognize these famous faces, I think. And what that heightened level of fame means is that these men are so famous that many portraits have been made of them without their permission or knowledge. And this is not uncommon. It's a long tradition within Western society, especially to celebrate and memorialize individuals that are great in stature, from public figures, political leaders, socialites to saints, and so on. And especially in the 20th and 21st century, where we have access to photos of everybody, it makes it easy for artists to kind of go online and depict folks in this way. So for all the admiration and awesomeness that we see in these individuals, many of us, for the everyday person, we won't get to experience the level of scrutiny that men like this experience, right? And this is a good thing. Being able to go grocery shopping without being followed, or being able to check in and out of a hotel without being harassed or worse. So for me, as a young black man and as an artist who depicts other black people, of all the people that I depict, is notable to me, and what's important to me is to try to unearth the middle ground of recognizing the humanity of black men within the spaces of where I exist. So looking at black men who have not been assassinated and whose talents won't garner million-dollar endorsement deals, I'm curious about the folks that exist in that space. And so I'm curious also about the liminal spaces that exist between anonymity and notoriety, and how either of those statuses intersect with racial and ethnic identity. So to make a shift, to go from those three great men, I want to introduce you to my nephew, Michael Scott. So not many of you know him yet. Mikey is 16 now, and he was about 5 when I made this painting of him. He was 5 when I took the photo to make the painting, and he was 10 when I actually made the painting. So Mikey is my sister's oldest son, and he's a talented artist, and he might be an Olympic gold medalist one day, or a prolific filmmaker. The title of this painting is Jenna's First, after my sister, because as I mentioned, he's the oldest of her 4 beautiful children. When I set out to create this painting and other pieces like it, once I'm spending time creating the artwork, I spend a lot of time thinking about the interactions that I have with the model, in this case, my nephew. And for the other paintings as well, I think about the photo session that we get to have together. So I typically use this time as I'm photographing the models to get to know them better, to have casual conversations. If they're an old friend, I might use the time just for us to catch up. So when I photographed Michael, I was babysitting him and his younger sister, Shemaya. When I photographed my brother, Anthony, who you see on the left, I was visiting my mom at her home in Wisconsin. Abdullah, I met as we both were hopping off the bus at the Go Durham station downtown, and he had shared with me how he was having difficulty navigating going to see his mother outside of Durham County. When I met Paul, when we were introduced, he was setting up a guitar amp in a UNC Chapel Hill art studio to play a little mini jam session, for me and a friend of mine. So when I made that painting of Paul, or after I made that painting of him, I started to realize this pattern based on the conversations that I have with the models, and that all of them seem to ruminate on or reflect on relationships that they had with women or girls or children in their lives. And so from Anthony's, our mother, from Abdullah's mother, and Paul's bandmate at the time, I just noticed that there was a significant impact that these individuals had on their lives. And so I changed and started a naming system for the paintings. So rather than referring to the paintings by their first names, I decided to use names of significant female figures that had significance to these individuals. And so these paintings, instead of being titled after the subject's first name, Jim, Antoine, and Travis, were named after loved ones of theirs. So they became Linda's guy, Manali's dad, and Marley Masai's uncle. So although these men aren't global icons, I know for a fact that they're loved and highly respected by the namesakes of these paintings. So not wanting to be left out of all that love and respect, I decided to include myself in this painting series as well. So I photographed myself for this painting months before we were engaged. So as I was transitioning from being my fiancée Leticia's dear friend to her future husband, this painting came into the mix via that relationship, a beautiful budding relationship. So Leticia's father is also a proud member of the series. Mr. Paul Welcome is who you see depicted here. And in addition to being the lovely Miss Janetta's husband, Mr. Welcome is also a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. He's one of the most dynamic storytellers I've ever heard. He's also helped me appreciate the difference between flapjacks and pancakes, and I realized I had never had a flapjack before Mr. Welcome, and his flapjacks are the bomb. That sounds so antiquated, the bomb. But Mr. Welcome's flapjacks are amazing, and I keep thinking about them, and I share those details not just to celebrate the budding relationship that I have with Leticia and her family and to highlight them, but also to highlight the things that don't make it into the paintings. So those are the things, those aspects have sort of transformed Mr. Welcome from being a stranger to me to someone that I admire, respect, and that I believe deserves recognition. So I would say that those are the invisible aspects of who Mr. Welcome is if you hadn't had a chance to get to know him. We'll call them the invisible aspects. So to counter the invisible aspects, I would say that the hypervisible attributes that Mr. Welcome has is if you see him in this photograph or if you met him in person, you see that he has a rich dark brown complexion. And this trait is something that's shared by many of the men in this series, in that they all have some light, medium, or dark brown complexion that I've altered to be half blue in the paintings. And among other things I'll share shortly, that half blue alteration is a way of pushing against the idea of being socially colorblind. So you may have heard folks talk about being not seeing color when it comes to race. Wanting to refute any dealings with racism or having any racist ideas. And so from my personal experience and peers that I'm connected to, I've heard people talk about not having a racist bone in their body. And you might hear some of the same folks make remarks, tasteless remarks, or maybe unintentional or well-meaning, that would show that they have some unconscious biases or some unconscious negative feelings about dark skin. So as someone that obsesses over the complexity and beauty and variety of human skin tone, I'm also hypersensitive to the ways that we turn something so marvelous into something so problematic. If you think about encountering someone and just seeing their complexion, if they're darker complected, whatever negative associations you might have, or the thought of that person becoming a target of suspicion because of their complexion obviously is problematic. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we might tend to associate lighter skin with some sense of safety. So from about 2004 to 2015, I made lots of paintings that were singular portraits or double portraits of people in my life to explore this idea of skin color. And about 7 years ago, I decided to remove the key aspect that was a way of identifying race in the painting. So I removed my warm brown skin tone and replaced it with cool gray tones as a way of removing that element to question how much complexion has to do with the ability to empathize with others. So that painting was the jumping off point to this series, which I was originally calling my Black and Blue project. This project is one in which I'd alter the faces to be half blue and half the natural complexion of the figures as a way of one accentuating the other, one half of the face making the other stand out. This is similar to a concept in basic color theory called simultaneous contrast. And the simultaneous contrast, this is one example where when you place a blue next to an orange, which are complementary colors, one sort of pushes against the other. The blue becomes that much more blue, the orange becomes that much more orange. So these paintings are, in effect, high contrast illustrations of a crucial in-between state. Does the complexion of black men, does my own complexion, is it something that gives me social warmth and comfort, especially as it's attached to my racial heritage or the way that I think of myself and my race? Or is it something that's a permanent mask that limits my capacity to receive empathy or other vital resources? Is it both of those things at once? Does my skin or my complexion turn to some unnatural color, make me a more empathetic character than my skin in its natural state? If cyanosis, which this series has now been called, if cyanosis is the skin turning blue from oxygen deprivation, what happens when my skin turns completely blue? Am I dying? Or is my breath being restored? So all of those questions are questions that the men in the series, the models in the series may have ready answers for. They're questions that some of you in the audience may have considered. If you don't identify as a black person, there's still questions that should be important to you. Are you able to empathize with others that don't share the same physical characteristics to you? Does your empathy extend that far? Are you able to see your own humanity and emotions in the faces of anonymous strangers that don't look anything like you? Do you believe that you share more in common with people like LeBron James than you do with the folks that you might stand in line with at Walmart or Whole Foods or wherever you buy pancake or flapjack mix from? And that question isn't to draw unnecessary lines between us and superstar athletes or other extraordinarily wealthy people. It's more to suggest that for all the multitude of reasons that we find to celebrate well-known people, I think we can name at least a few reasons why it's worthwhile to celebrate everyday people too. We all just want to be seen, and more to the point, we all want to have our humanity recognized by others in some way, shape, or form. So I think that by me painting individuals that visitors come into a gallery or a museum not having prior knowledge of is an opportunity for me to stretch my own capacity for empathy. I didn't say this at the top of the speech, and it may be apparent to you, but I'm at least a little bit celebrity obsessed myself. And so I'll give you a couple examples. A friend had introduced me to two members of the relatively famous rap collective, the Justice League. I met these two guys, and I had to do my best to keep my cool so as not to embarrass myself and my friend for making the introduction, but I was a little bit starstruck. And the other example is that I was at the National Museum of Art here at Duke, and I met Grant Hill, and I was thinking, I was like, Grant Hill drinks Sprite. But that reference may be a little bit off, but as I met Grant Hill, as we made this introduction, I did my best to keep my cool as I handed him my business card, looking way up at him. And so I share those examples to say that I get it. I think people that do amazing things and are great in stature should be recognized, and And I would say that the unstoppable marketing campaigns that won't let us forget who those people are, since they'll continue on, I think we also have an opportunity to recognize the spaces that all of us occupy and see our roles as the son, brother, father, sister, mother, cousin, bestie, as valuable, special, essential roles, so that when we leave this earth, if we leave with at least one person cherishing who we were to them, I think it will have been of life well lived. And all the portraits by anonymous admirers couldn't add up or couldn't measure up to the wonderful stories and the indelible impressions left in the hearts of those that truly know and love us. So as Indigo's dad and Leticia's fiance and Evie's son, I thank you for listening to this presentation, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference today. Thank you.